Revenge films.
My name is Michelle. I live with my husband, Stefan. Stefan and I normally get along fine when it's just the two of us, but ever since we got married, I've tried to avoid the rest of his family. It was to the point where I dreaded spending Thanksgiving or New Year's with his parents and his sister and her husband and their child, our nephew, Henry. Even though it was only twice a year that I would have to see them, it was still extremely stressful for me. That's because every single person in my husband's family had no manners whatsoever. Especially his sister's son, Henry, had been spoiled as the first grandchild in the family. Even though he's already in the 3rd grade, he still didn't know right from wrong, and nobody in the family ever scolded him. When I went to his family house for the first time in a while that year for New Year's, Henry was stomping around the house.
"Oh, look, it's the old man and the old woman."
If you're gonna say that, you mean your uncle and your auntie, right? You're so funny, Henry!
Shut up!
As soon as I heard Henry speak like that, I already wanted to go home, because I know how the rest of the day was going to go. As we all gathered around the dining table to eat together, Henry started talking about inappropriate things and then he started playing with his food. As a cherry on top, he got up in the middle of dinner and then he went over to the altar and started eating whatever he wanted out of the offerings for the deceased. Despite this terrible behavior, not one person tried to scold him, and instead they were just watching and laughing. It was almost like they were encouraging him, and it only made me more irritated. When we were all finished eating, I was cleaning up on the dining table. While I had turned away for the brief moment, Henry had gone over to my purse, and without saying anything, took out my wallet and pulled out money from it.
"This woman has money, but she only gave me $10 for my Christmas gift. That cheap old woman."
I was shocked and furious, and I was about to explode. But regardless of that, my sister-in-law and my in-laws were all laughing. You're right, all they did was agree with him, and they didn't try to scold him at all. At this point, I couldn't keep my mouth shut anymore, so I had no choice but to scold him myself. You can't go into other people's wallets and open them up without permission.
Huh? He's only a child, it's fine.
Honey, that girl doesn't have any children of her own, so she doesn't understand.
That was when my husband, who had stayed silent then, suddenly opened his mouth like he was over it. I was looking forward to him taking my side, but that was in vain. Instead, my husband said the most unbelievable thing.
What's the big deal? All he did was open up your wallet. He's still just a kid, so why can't you forgive him?
That was the final straw, and I felt something snap inside me. I decided to use my hidden skill, which was a black belt in judo, and I threw down every single person in my husband's family. Because I had studied judo for many years, throwing down an adult was a piece of cake to me. I looked down with cold eyes as they were all panicking on the ground.
Ouch!
Ah! What have you done, you violent monster? Of course, it goes without saying that I didn't want to injure them, and so I took it easy on them so that they wouldn't get hurt. When I saw them all roll down on the ground like that, I felt a little bit better.
There must be something wrong with you to be violent against your husband's family. I'm going to call the police.
Henry, are you okay? Have you hit your head? My husband was furious at me, and the child was crying and screaming, but I ignored them all and I left. After that, I went straight to my family's house and I turned off my cell phone. My mom was there and I decided to spend the rest of my New Year's holiday relaxing with my mother. My parents had actually gotten divorced years ago, and my mother was living at home by herself. They had told me that the reason behind the divorce was because they had a difference in values. My father was a policeman, and I was inspired by him to begin judo. Even after my parents got divorced, I always looked up to my father. As I was relaxing at home, I realized it had been a while since I'd seen both of my parents, so I called my father and said I wanted to see him. He said he would come by to see me soon. On that day, I had a drink for the first time in a while, and after my mom let me vent to her, I was so exhausted that I quickly fell asleep. The next morning, the doorbell rang to the house, and I assumed it was my dad and was excited to open the door. However, standing there was my mother-in-law and my husband. My mother-in-law was furious, and as soon as she walked into the front door, she started screaming at me and my mother.
"Because you were so violent towards my grandson, he has PTSD and he can't even go to school. I'm going to sue you. You're going behind bars. You better apologize. Get down on your knees and pay a settlement fee."
My mother-in-law came barging to the house like this, and my mother and I stood there in shock.
It's exactly as my mom says. We're going to get a divorce, so you better get ready to pay the settlement fee.
If we're going to get a divorce, then we can speak with our lawyers present. But also, if you're going to be screaming this much, you're going to disturb all the neighbors, so please leave. We can talk about this later. Even though I tried to get them out, my mother-in-law refused to budge. She kept yelling at me to get down on my knees to apologize and that she was going to call the police on me, and stood there. That lasted for almost an hour, and that was when the doorbell rang for a second time. When I opened up the front door, it was indeed my father, standing there with a terrifying look on his face. When I realized that my father, who's a lot stronger than me, had been listening to the conversation this whole time, I thought that my husband was in danger, and I immediately yelled at him to run. But my husband didn't even have the chance to run away, because my dad picked him up by the collar, yelling,
You bastard! What the hell did you just say to my daughter?
And threw him headfirst through the sliding door. During that time, my mother-in-law just screamed and ran out of the door as fast as she could. Stefan was on the ground, unable to move or speak. I later found out that while all this was happening, my mother had secretly called her ex-husband and had him come over as soon as possible. While I was cleaning up the sliding doors, the two of them made my husband get down on his knees and gave him an earful of lecture. Stefan was crying as he apologized, but neither my parents nor I had any intention of forgiving him. And then, after a few hours after that, my husband was kicked out of the house. He looked like a zombie as he dragged his feet away from us.
That must have been difficult. If anything happens again, you need to call your dad straight away.
Yeah, thank you, Dad.
I only did the obvious as your father. I would do anything for you.
Those were his last words as my dad left the house. It only made me respect him even more. After that, perhaps they became terrified of my father, but my husband and my mother-in-law didn't come near our house ever again. For a while, I thought hard about it because I knew how heavy a divorce was. However, I didn't want to have anything to do with my husband or his family ever again, so I decided to go through with the divorce. I called my husband out one day, and we were going to have a discussion. That was when I served him the divorce papers. Stefan seemed to think that we weren't actually going to get a divorce, and in the beginning, he refused to sign the divorce papers, nor did he accept the divorce. On top of that, he tried to say over and over again to,
Come home! Let's start over! We can live happily together!
But of course I refused. After the incident on New Year's Day, I had enough of my husband and his family that didn't have any manners, and I didn't have any love for him anymore. I was firm in my stance to get a divorce, and so I told my husband that if he wasn't going to sign the papers, that I was going to get a lawyer involved. That was when he seemed to give up, and he reluctantly signed the divorce papers. The very next day, I turned it into the city office. Then my father introduced me to a great lawyer, and we did a full separation of assets, and the divorce was finalized. My mom and I decided that it would be best for me to live with her for a while. I was able to find a new job in the city, and my new life began from there. I was starting to get used to my new job, and life was going really great, when one day I had plans to meet my father for dinner. So I rushed out of the company to meet him when I saw a familiar car outside of the office. When I looked inside of the car, as I expected, in the driver's seat was my former sister-in-law. As soon as she saw me, she got out of the car and ran over to me. And then, she suddenly grabbed me by the shoulders and yelled insults at me. Please calm down, there are other people here.
That doesn't matter. How dare you be violent towards my sweet baby Henry? Ever since that day he's been sick and he can only sit out of gym class and watch. Look what you've done to him.
I barely touched him when I took him down though.
You better not think this over just because you got a divorce. I'm never gonna forgive you until you pay a settlement fee of $100,000.
But even if you say that, I didn't even understand where the amount of $100,000 came out of. And I was getting tired of putting up with this nonsense when my father arrived to pick me up.
Why don't you take those hands off of her?
My dad was a large man, and when my sister-in-law saw him standing there, glaring at her with a terrifying look on his face, she started to shake.
What settlement are you talking about? Your son was the one trying to steal money out of my daughter's wallet, wasn't he? That's stealing and a crime, isn't it?
Well...
My father's presence was strong, and my former sister-in-law stood there, unable to speak or move.
Stop wasting your time coming after my daughter in a place like this, and hurry up and go home and teach your son how to be a proper human!
She must have been pretty terrified because my former sister-in-law stumbled back to her car shaking and sped away. That was the last I ever saw her, and she never came near me ever again. And once again, I was grateful to my father, who always had a strong sense of justice and looked after me so well. After that, I heard rumors that as Henry got older, he started stealing from shops and that he was arrested by the police multiple times. My former sister-in-law started to get cornered by her husband, that it was her fault for spoiling him too much. But then she took those words and said the exact same thing to her parents, and the entire family turned against each other into a massive disaster. My ex-husband tried to get in between them, but instead he even became a target, and in the end I heard that the entire family fell apart. After that, my former sister-in-law became a single mother, and because she had to raise a child by herself who was constantly stealing and getting into trouble, she got neurosis. From there, she tried to finally start scolding her son that she had been spoiling all these years, but it was already too late. Because Henry had never been scolded before, he started throwing tantrums all around the house. He was old enough to cause a lot of damage, and he was out of her control. At first, I was so shocked by my in-laws' family that had such terrible manners that I nearly developed a distrust for people. But after the divorce, I was finally able to regain a peaceful and stress-free life, and I'm really glad. If I ever fall in love again, I need to make sure that I get to know my partner's family before I get married to them. And from now on, I hope I can give back to my parents as well, who always took my side when I needed them the most.
My name is Jessica. It's been just over a year since I got married to my husband, Michael. I'm in my early 20s and Michael is 30 years old. From the very first time that I met Michael's parents, Michael's mother glared at me as though to ask who I was and where I came from, and I could easily assume that she must not like me. Before I got married, I was working full-time at a company, but my husband said that he wanted me to wait at home and have a warm, home-cooked meal for him when he came back from work. So I resigned when I got married. For the first couple of months, everything was peaceful. I would wake up early and have breakfast with my husband, and then during the afternoon, I would finish up all the chores around the house. Just before the evening, I would start to get dinner prepared and wait for Michael to come home from work. There wasn't anything special about every day, but I was happy with my life with my husband. However, around the time of year had passed since we got married, my mother-in-law started coming over for lunch every day because she lived nearby. And then on top of that, she would say to me,
Your mother-in-law is here at lunchtime, so you should be offering lunch to me at the very least. Where are your manners? Seriously, you're such a thoughtless woman.
And she practically demanded me to make lunch for her. I'm very sorry, I'll prepare it straight away. And so, I brought out what I had already prepared for lunch for myself to my mother-in-law instead. But after taking one bite, she said,
My goodness, how awful does this taste?
What?
What? Did you not hear me? I just said that your cooking is unbelievably awful. How can I eat this?
When my mother-in-law said that, I also tried the food, but it was the exact same as what I usually make, and I couldn't understand why she thought it tasted awful, but I was shocked. However, my mother-in-law would continue to come over for lunch day after day and demand that I feed her lunch. Even though she was the one that asked for lunch, no matter what I served her, she would complain that it tasted disgusting. And when she threw the entire cooking pot into the sink, I was completely stunned. Every single time my mother-in-law would come over, she told me that there was too much seasoning, that I didn't know how to cut vegetables, or that she couldn't taste anything. She would only complain, and then at the end she would say,
I can't believe my son has such a wife that can't even cook a decent meal. I feel so sorry for him. I'm going to beat you into shape.
And would yell at me. I grew up in a single mother household, and my mother taught me how to cook from when I was a young age. I didn't mean to brag, but I did think that I was pretty good at cooking. The first time my husband tried my cooking, he was also super happy about it.
Jessica, you're so good at cooking! This is the first time I've ever eaten anything this delicious!
You're exaggerating, but I'm really happy to hear you say that it's delicious. Thanks, Michael. Ever since the first time I cooked for him, Michael would ask me to cook him something after every single date. That's how much he loved my cooking. However, as for his mother, she would always take one bite and then complain about it, almost like it was a template. So I don't think that it had anything to do with the flavors. I was honestly discouraged to think that she was bullying her daughter-in-law like this, but I thought that if I tried to go against her, it would only get worse, so I tried to ignore her every time. But then, one day, I served the pickles that my mom had homemade for my mother-in-law. But she said,
Oh goodness, what the heck is this? It tastes like trash. Is it rotten? And you served me this?
As she said that, she threw the entire Tupperware into the trash can. Hey, what are you doing? Even if you are my mother-in-law, I can't forgive you for that. Why would you throw it in the trash?
What? Are you trying to tell me that you have some complaint against me?
Those were pickles that my mother had homemade, and they're my favorite food.
Oh dear, no wonder why your cooking tastes so horrible. It's because your mother is like this as well. It all makes sense now.
When she said that, I decided that I was going to get back at her. And that's when I came up with the plan to really serve my mother-in-law some food that tasted disgusting. As usual, my mother-in-law came over around lunchtime, and the first thing she did was go into the kitchen and started checking my food. But then, she really did scrunch up her face, and she froze on the spot.
Hey, Jessica, the stew that you made, don't you think it tastes funny?
When she said that to me, I nonchalantly replied, I purposely made it like that. And the next day, the day after that, she didn't back down, and she still came over. But regardless of what she said to me, my only response was to say, I purposely made it like that. And I continued to pretend like I was cooking these dishes specifically like this for her. Well, even though I was giving her normal dishes and she complained to me that much saying awful things about me and my cooking, my mother-in-law seemed genuinely shocked when I actually served her disgusting food. But that's no surprise. Without even taste testing anything, I was just throwing in all kinds of random ingredients and seasoning, so there was no way that I was going to be making anything edible. Usually, while eating my food, she would just trash my cooking, and on the worst days, she would even trash my personality. But because the food was actually disgusting, she wouldn't even pick up her chopsticks to eat, which meant she couldn't complain about it. And then my mother-in-law started coming over. It looked like she didn't want to eat any food, but I continued to offer it to her. Here you go! Here's some lunch for you, ma'am! I made a lot for you today, so please do eat to your heart's content. I would say that and serve her a full plate for her, but because she knew that it was going to taste awful, she didn't even want to lift her chopsticks to the plate. But she also wanted to complain to me at the same time and harass me, so she was stuck in that in between. But because it tasted so awful, perhaps she finally stopped wanting to come over for lunch anymore. And perhaps, because I was also starting to serve her truly terrible tasting food, my mother-in-law eventually ended up going straight to Michael and tried to complain to him that I didn't know how to cook and I wasn't fit to be his wife. However, Michael knew better than anybody that my cooking was delicious, so the moment that he heard that, he knew that something was wrong. If anything, when he found out that his mother was coming over every single day and then harassing me that I didn't know how to cook, he was furious.
Why are you even coming over to eat lunch at my house? You better stop harassing your daughter-in-law, and you better pay back all of the food expenses that you've eaten until now. Thanks to you, do you have any idea how much our food expenses have been wasted?
Apparently, he didn't hold back against her. On top of that, when he found out that his mother was barging into her house every single day around lunch, and she was not only verbally but also physically trashing my food, he was devastated. My husband felt so bad that he got down on his knees to apologize to me.
Jessica, I really am sorry. I really do think that your cooking is the most delicious in the whole entire universe. There's no way that it would ever taste bad.
That's what he said to me, and I felt bad that he was apologizing so much. So I decided to tell my husband everything from start to finish. When I did, he was cracking up.
I see. So you were just trying to give my mother a taste of her own words.
I did end up wasting some food and ingredients. I feel really bad about that, but...
I really am sorry that I made you suffer because of my mom. I'll make sure that I talk to her about it so it never happens again.
After he said that, Michael picked up the phone straight away and he called his dad and told him everything that his mother had been doing. Michael's father was still working full-time at a company, and apparently he never imagined that during the daytime, his wife was barging into his daughter-in-law's house and doing such a thing. And so one day, he brought his wife and came to apologize to me in person.
How dare you say that Jessica's cooking was disgusting! There must be something wrong with your tongue! Do you need to get it checked, even though her cooking is 100 times more delicious than yours? What are you saying?
My mother-in-law seemed shocked that her husband yelled at her like this, and she stood there in silence. But he wasn't lying. That was in fact the case. My mother-in-law always said that my cooking was disgusting, and then she would end up cooking herself in my kitchen. But there was no balance between any of the flavors, and it didn't taste good at all. And so, anytime my mother-in-law came over to cook at my house, every single time I would adjust the flavors afterwards before I serve it to my husband for dinner. As for why my father-in-law knew about my cooking and could compare it to his wife's, it's because pretty soon after Michael and I got married, his mother got sick and she wasn't able to cook for some time. So for a couple of days, I was delivering homemade meals to Michael's parents. And at that time, he was highly complimentary of my cooking.
Jessica, you really are an amazing cook. I had heard from my son how delicious your food was, but I was still shocked and and how great everything tasted. At this rate, I wish that I could eat it every single day. And plus, they're all well-balanced meals and still healthy.
My mother taught me all kinds of recipes when I was younger. My mom is a registered dietitian, so she knows what's best.
I see. It all makes sense. My son is a lucky man that he was able to marry a woman like you who's so good at cooking. Thank you for always looking after him, for keeping his health in mind like this.
Yes, sir. With that experience in the past, my father-in-law also knew that I was a good cook and that I would never make anything that didn't taste good. Perhaps my mother-in-law thought that by saying that I don't know how to cook, she would be able to tell her son to get a divorce from a wife that couldn't even make a proper meal. But instead, everybody was turning on her and telling her that she didn't know how to cook, and she was completely silenced. She was a shell of a human standing there. Both my husband and his father were furious with her.
Who do you think you are? Complaining about Jessica's cooking when you don't even know how to cook yourself! If anything, you should go and learn a thing or two from her. All these years, I've had to tolerate your terrible cooking. That's right! Even I knew that your cooking was terrible, and me and Dad, we've both been tolerating it because you're my mom! And without even realizing that your own cooking is disgusting, you were trying to come after Jessica! There must be something wrong with you! I don't want to eat your cooking for the rest of my life! That's true. I don't want to be together with a woman like this, who can't cook, and yet is going to be so awful to somebody else about it! So get out!
Wait, I was wrong. I will never say that Jessica's cooking is disgusting ever again. So please forgive me.
After being yelled from all directions like this, Michael's mother was sobbing as she came to apologize to me. After that, she was somehow able to gain her husband's pity and avoid a divorce. But she was banned from coming over to my house for lunch anymore. And then, every single day, her husband was complaining to her that her cooking was disgusting, and I heard that she is hanging by a thread nowadays.
My name is Melissa. I was born in a very small town. I know a lot of people call their towns small towns, but this small town that I lived in really was a small town in the middle of nowhere. The only place that I could play when we were little were the rivers and the mountains. Unlike the cities, there are no karaoke places, bowling lanes, or places to hang out. You could easily sum it up to one simple word of boring. And maybe that's why my little sister Karen had a really bad habit of repeatedly messing around with the guys around town. My little sister was almost 10 years younger than me, and even as her big sister, I could admit that she had a beautiful face. And this little sister of mine would always have multiple boyfriends at all times. Of course, it was a very small town, so rumors spread quickly about the people who didn't speak well of her. For me, to have a little sister that's gotten around town with the guys was extremely painful and embarrassing. And for the record, my parents had my little sister a lot later in life, so they adored this big daughter and completely spoiled her. All I could do was get away from the small town where my little sister was, so I studied really hard and I got all my certifications to get a job. I went to multiple dates and I was finally able to meet a man who lived in the city. I quickly got married to him and I succeeded in getting out of a small town. Now I live in an apartment building in the middle of the city and I'm so happy. However, those peaceful days were about to explode and be destroyed. That's because one day, out of nowhere, my little sister came rolling into the apartment that I was living in with my husband, John. Of course I was completely against it, and furious. Why are you here? If you want to live in the city, then you should go find your own place and your own apartment.
How awful! Your little sister is in trouble and doesn't have a place to stay in the city, and you're going to kick her out? Hey, what do you think about it, sir?
While my little sister and I were arguing, my husband was just standing there and listening to us. When she pointed her attention towards him and addressed him in a voice, she even slightly touched him as well.
That's a good question.
My husband then tried to cover up his smile with a cough, and he was desperately trying to put on a serious face. However, the moment that my sister's chest bumped up against his arm, I didn't miss that smile that came across his face.
If it's only for a little while, then why not? That should be fine, right, Melissa?
You and I purchased this apartment together, and we can split the loan in half as well. If you're going to insist, then there's not much I can say, because this is both of our space after all. What was I trying to get across to him? Was that I didn't want this, and for him to say no, but instead my husband ignored my signals and turned to my little sister.
Isn't that great? Well then, you can live here with us for a little while. Karen, was it?
I am just an inexperienced girl from a small town. Thanks for taking care of me.
My little sister smiled and bowed at my husband.
You're saying that like we're about to get married!
Oh, please, you're right.
Looks like my sister and my husband hit it off with each other straight away. However, I was overwhelmed with the uneasiness. I knew that my little sister had the personality of a small devil, and I knew that she hadn't changed. That day, I prepared dinner, and we all sat down to eat. My sister kept complaining to my husband, and even poured his alcohol.
Mr. John, you're still so young, but you're amazing. I can't believe you're able to buy a brand new apartment in the middle of the city like this.
It was nothing.
When I saw my husband blushing and grinning, I couldn't help but chime in. Actually, we're still paying off the loan for the apartment, and just so you know, I'm also paying for half of the loan.
Come on, Melissa. You seriously have no manners. Seems like you don't know what it means to be supportive to your husband. Isn't that right, Mr. John? I hope you don't think that all small-town girls are like my sister here, and that we all don't know how to treat a man.
Karen was batting her eyelashes at my husband, and his face was turning bright red as he nodded multiple times. After my little sister graduated from high school, she had been lazing around. She acted like she was helping at home when in reality she was unemployed and she would squeeze out any allowance from our parents and was even coming to me for help like this. My little sister was really good at seducing men, but she didn't know how to live life as an adult, and she had no intention of even trying to work. She was the worst type of human, truly.
Hey Karen, at least help us out with cleaning up.
On the weekend, I did all the laundry that had been piling up throughout the week, and I cleaned up around the apartment. On the other hand, my little sister didn't lift a finger, and instead of helping out with the chores, she just laid on the sofa eating potato chips and watching a Hollywood movie.
What? Come on! This is the best part of the movie!
Don't be stupid. Get up and help me clean.
But I don't wanna.
When my husband wasn't around, she would try to make herself look a bit more useful in front of him, but when he wasn't home, this is when she acted like. It was a scene that I was used to seeing back home. The days went by and my little sister had completely attached herself to my apartment, and her personal belongings were only increasing around the house. That was when I decided that I was going to kick my sister out. However, when we were sitting around the table for dinner that evening, I finally told my sister that she needed to leave. However, I received an opposing opinion, not from who I expected.
Don't you feel sorry for her? I found out that Karen doesn't even have any income right now. Don't you think it's going to be too difficult for her to find a place to live without any money? At the very least, you should be looking after her until she finds a job, especially as her big sister!
Don't be stupid. What's gotten into you, John? What's going on? Even though there are a few pathetic parts of my husband, I thought that he was generally well-mannered as a person. Surely you've noticed that Karen isn't even trying to look for a job, but she's just lazing around the house and mooching off of us.
You really don't get it, do you, Melissa?
My little sister then interrupted, as though she was going to explain the situation to me.
Mr. John wants some more excitement in his life. He wants a flower. Someone like me who's going to bring decoration and color to his life. A beautiful flower like me.
I couldn't understand what kind of nonsense this was, but then, when I looked over at my husband's face, he was nodding in agreement like she wasn't wrong.
Why don't you go and take a look at yourself in the mirror first, Melissa?
Compared to my little sister who was 10 years younger than me, and was wearing so much makeup every day, I couldn't help but agree that perhaps I wasn't the most feminine and floral as she was. But what am I supposed to do? In order to pay back the loan on this apartment, I have to work full-time at a company, and I also still manage to do all the chores around the house.
Oh, please, that's just a matter of hard work. A matter of hard work and your mindset.
My sister then laughed as if she was taunting me, and it was infuriating. What are you saying? You don't know anything. When I raised my voice, Karen dramatically screamed,
"Ah, you're so scary,"
and cowered and threw herself into John's arms. At that moment, I saw my husband's arms wrap around naturally around Karen's waist without hesitation. That moment was burned into my memory. And Karen as well didn't seem to be bothered one bit that my husband's hand was right around her butt. They're so close. Why are they so close? Way too close. I had a really bad feeling wash over me. I myself thought it was over the top to hire a detective agency, but within no time, I discovered that my husband and my little sister were having an affair. Once I was able to collect plenty of evidence that night, I confronted the two of them about the affair and shoved the evidence in their faces. At first, my husband was stunned and looked terrified, but as soon as my little sister went over to confront him, he seemed to get his energy back and tried to turn it on me.
This is my house! I'm allowed to decide who can live in it!
Is that so? If that's what you're going to say, I would be happy to leave this place. In regards to the divorce, you can talk to my lawyer about it, but I hope you're ready to pay a settlement fee.
Sure, do whatever you want. I don't care.
Ah, you're so hot, Mr. John. I love you.
After I screamed at my husband and pushed him away, Karen latched onto John in his arms.
With this, it looks like the apartment belongs to me now. And this time, my annoying big sister who's always in the way will finally be gone.
I heard my sister mutter out that loud enough for me to hear. John was just standing there blushing and grinning that my little sister was grabbing onto him.
But he didn't seem to realize, and so I heard that John and my sister were able to enjoy their fun and carefree lifestyle for about 3 days before it all came crashing down. It seems that apartment is completely a disaster.
Hey, Melissa, come over and help to the apartment and clean it up.
Are you stupid? You need to clean up your own mess yourself.
Oh, come on, wait a minute.
My little sister was trying to beg me, but I didn't answer and I just hung up the phone on her. And then about half a month later, I got a phone call from my husband begging me.
Please, come on, Melissa! I don't have enough money to pay off the loan on the apartment. Will you please let me borrow some money just for the payment?
Why don't you just go ask for consumer finances?
But no way!
I bet you got caught up with Karen and you've been spending money recklessly for her, haven't you? Despite having a bad spending habit, Karen won't spend any of her own money, so I can only imagine. I'm not going to lend you any money, and first of all, you're my ex-husband. You're a stranger to me now. It's none of my business. I left them for about half a year, but then one day, John and my little sister came all the way to my beautiful new apartment that I was living in to apologize to me.
I wasn't able to pay off the loan by myself in the end, so I had to let go of the apartment.
Is that so? Well, I was paying for half of the loan, and you no longer had me, so that's no surprise. I nonchalantly replied with logic, and my husband froze.
So, even though I sold the apartment, I'm still really far from being able to pay off the full loan.
So what?
Don't you think you're taking it too far by asking for a settlement fee from your ex-husband, who can't even pay off his loan?
That's right, that's right! I can't believe that you were trying to collect a settlement fee from your own sister.
When John finally got to see the real reason why they were here, Karen chimed in. Don't be stupid. The settlement fee is your own fault. You're my ex-husband and my little sister who had an affair. That's the problem. Now get out. I kicked them out and they stormed out of my apartment. After that, apparently they tried to ask their parents for help, but I heard that they were both denied. Of course they were, no matter how much my parents spoiled my little sister. They not only denied lending her any money, they didn't even let her into the house after she slept with her sister's husband and caused a divorce. I heard the two of them are living in a rundown apartment together now. My little sister is still living in the city like she dreamed of, but she certainly didn't have time or money to enjoy living in the city. When I happened to come across her the other day, I didn't see a shadow of my old sister, and she was working at a cash register of a cheap grocery store, and it made me laugh. For the record, I was actually pretty dressed up at the time, and I was in the middle of heading towards a date with the man that was going to become my new husband. My name is Nancy. Ever since I got married to my husband, Kevin, I've been living with him and my mother-in-law at his family's house. My husband was an elite man who worked at a major company with a lot of overseas business trips. Even though he's crazy busy with work every single day, he is the type of person that doesn't show any tiredness at home and is always wonderful to me. One day, my husband was about to be sent out on a long-term business trip for 6 months overseas. But that was also when we discovered that I was pregnant. Kevin was worried and he said that he would deny any project and stay with me. But because I got along well with my mother-in-law at the time, I decided to push him to go on the business trip for 6 months. However, after I discovered that I was pregnant, I quit my job and became a full-time housewife. That was when my mother-in-law suddenly started bullying me at home. Because my husband had already gone overseas on his business trip, there was nobody that could defend me. And all I could do was just be a victim to my mother-in-law's bullying. I knew that it was only for 6 months that I had to tolerate this, so I desperately tried to keep going despite how much she was bullying me. About 2 months after my husband had gone on his business trip, his side of the family got together over a public holiday. The last time that all of the relatives had gotten together was at Kevin and my wedding, so my mother-in-law was really excited to host everybody at our house. I also thought it was a great opportunity for me to be useful to my mother-in-law, so I did my best to cook for everybody, to make sure they all had full drinks at all times, and worked very hard to make sure that everybody was happy. As I was doing that, all my relatives complimented me for my cooking. Nancy, you're such a hard worker, and you're so bright and positive and energetic. How wonderful! Thank you so much. I'm really so jealous that Kevin was able to find such a wonderful wife to marry into the family. Oh, that's not true at all. Hey, Nancy, just because you're being complimented a little bit, you better not get carried away. What? I was genuinely happy that the relatives were complimenting me, but that was when I noticed that my mother-in-law had gotten into a sour mood. Even though I was trying to be thoughtful of her and include her in the conversation, my mother-in-law simply ignored me and refused to speak to me for the rest of the day. And after that incident, my mother-in-law's attitude towards me only continued to get worse and worse. Even when I cooked for her, she would tell me that it tasted terrible and to throw it away in front of me.
And even though I was pregnant, she made me climb up to the roof and clean the windows on the second floor from the outside. She was commanding me around as much as she wanted, and then almost every day she would say things to me like, "I think of you as my own daughter, so I'm going to be straightforward with you." She would start with a buffer and then yell, "You're useless! Even though you're the one living here, you're just a lazy full-time housewife! Get out!" And she would raise her voice. Day by day, the bullying was escalating, and when I thought about having to go through this for 6 months, I wanted to cry. However, I knew that my husband was really busy in the middle of his overseas business trip right now, and I didn't want to make him worry while he was so far away, so I couldn't bring myself to contact him. But days like this continued, and because of the stress, I lost my appetite completely. My morning sickness also became terrible, and I was no longer able to take it anymore. I became so weak, I was hospitalized. I couldn't stand it anymore, and so I called my husband and told him everything. Kevin was furious with his mother, and he told me that he would call her immediately and tell her to stop saying such awful things to me. While I was hospitalized, because I was separated from my mother-in-law, I was finally able to relax. Thanks to that, little by little, my appetite came back, and I was able to be discharged from the hospital after about 1 week. On the day I was being discharged from the hospital, the people who came to pick me up were my brother-in-law John and his wife, who lived far away in the suburbs. Apparently, Kevin had contacted his brother for me, and they went out of their way from such a far place to come pick me up at the hospital. Apparently, both of them used to be in a famous gang back in their hometown, so upon first glance, they seemed a bit scary. But they were very kind people. I don't get to see that very often, but because they were so thoughtful, not only my husband, but also me, felt like I could trust my brother-in-law and his wife. Thanks to that, because I was able to see them for the first time in a while, I was really happy and I instantly felt my energy come back. When I thought about having to go back home after this was daunting, but just knowing that I wouldn't have to be alone with my mother-in-law on the first day after being discharged from the hospital was enough to make me feel better. I was really grateful to my husband as well as my brother-in-law and his wife. When we got back home, my mother-in-law was waiting, with sushi delivery ready on the table. Because John and his wife were coming back home for the first time in a while, my mother-in-law was very excited, and she put a lot of effort into the meal. As we were all sitting at the table and started eating lunch, as usual, my mother-in-law started to bully me. "I think of you as my own daughter, so I'm going to be straightforward with you. The fact that you can't even maintain your health while you're pregnant makes you a failure as a mother." "I'm very sorry that I made you worry, but can't you see that I'm healthy now?"
Nobody was worried about your health anyway. Don't get carried away. That child in your stomach better be fine, right?
"Yes, ma'am." Immediately after coming home from being hospitalized, I was already being yelled at like this. And I was just starting to feel terrible about it when suddenly my sister-in-law, who's been sitting there listening the entire time, opened her mouth.
I also think of you as my real mother, so I'm going to be straightforward with you as well.
And she said that. My sister-in-law took a deep breath in and out.
Why the hell are you bullying your own daughter-in-law, you piece of crap? You think that Nancy is your real daughter? Don't make me laugh. Where do you think you would ever find a parent who's going to bully their daughter-in-law while she's pregnant like this and cause her so much stress that she had to be hospitalized?
Once my sister-in-law got started, she didn't stop, and my mother-in-law was taken aback. Her mouth was moving, but she wasn't able to get anything else out as she sat there and listened in silence. And that was when my brother-in-law also chimed in, and it turned into a war zone.
I don't want to think of someone who bullies their daughter-in-law as my own mother. The fact that I had to be raised by such a horrible parent is the most embarrassing thing in my life. Don't ever act like you're my mother in front of me ever again!
I wanted to do whatever I could to calm down the situation, so I tried to smile and make a joke. "Ma'am, I hope you know that I can always mix detergent into your food whenever I want to." I thought that everybody might laugh, but then everybody went silent in an instant, and then my mother-in-law started crying.
I can't believe that all of you would bully your mother like this! How awful! All of you get out now!
As she said that, she ran off in tears into the room. We did exactly as we were told, and quickly gathered our belongings and drove away from my mother-in-law's house. Once I was put back in the car, my brother-in-law and his wife told me that these were all instructions given to them by Kevin. When my husband found out the reason why I was hospitalized, he immediately contacted his brother, and they said that they asked him to join them for a short time. And then, when he explained the situation to them, John and his wife were furious with their mother, and they told me that they had to come pick me up, ready for war. Once I left my mother-in-law's house, the first thing I did was call Kevin. On the phone, he reassured me that he was going to cut his business trip early and asked me to wait a little bit longer at John's house. And so during that time, John and his wife let me stay with them. In the car ride home, they told me that I could tell them everything that happened until then, so that I could get it all off on my chest, so I did. I told them all of the struggles that I had gone through until I was hospitalized.
That must have been awful. I'm amazed you were able to tolerate it for such a long time.
I don't even want to think of her as my mother. She's so awful. Sheesh. Good riddance.
After she did all that to you, there's absolutely no need for you to be involved with her anymore. You could just forget about that mother-in-law now and just live with Kevin and relax.
I'm sorry, but I hope you can make yourself at home at our place for a while.
Thank you so much, truly.
But you know, when you said that you would put detergent in her food, that really shocked me.
That was pretty scary.
Good thing that we were able to rescue you before you put detergent in her food.
That's true.
I meant it as a joke. I really didn't mean it. After that, the incident about the detergent became a legendary story among us, and we often spoke about it. Not long after I was living with John and his wife, I suddenly got a phone call from my mother-in-law. Yes, hello?
Hello, Nancy. Where are you right now?
I'm being taken care of by John and his wife.
If you apologize now, then I won't mind forgiving you, and I wouldn't mind forgetting that you insulted me like that. I want to hurry up and live with my son and grandchild, so you need to come home.
Actually, when Kevin gets back from his business trip, we are going to be finding a new place to live. And he told me that I don't need to go back to your house ever again, so I don't believe I'll be returning anytime soon.
What do you mean that you're not going to live here anymore?
Yes, that's right, and I don't want anything to do with you anymore, so we will be cutting off all ties with you.
Cutting off all ties with me? You really think you're going to be forgiven for doing that?
Both Kevin and John have told me that they would be fine, and they also told me that I don't need to answer any phone calls from you anymore, so I'm going to hang up now. Goodbye. After I declared that I'd cut off all ties with her, I hung up the phone and immediately blocked her. Apparently, my mother-in-law called my husband and his brother multiple times and tried to apologize over and over again, but neither of them would accept her apology and they all became estranged. When Kevin finally came home from his business trip, we went back to his mother's house one last time to gather all his belongings, and his mother was crying on her knees, begging for him to live together once again, but Kevin coldly responded,
I told you, didn't I? Anybody who's going to hurt my family, I'm cutting all ties with.
And that was all he said. And then my mother-in-law turned to me and reluctantly tried to apologize. Before I re-entered the third trimester, we were able to find a new place to live, and then was beginning our new lives. Not long after that, I gave birth to a healthy baby. Kevin said that he wasn't going to let his mother lay a finger on our baby, and he didn't even tell her that the baby was born. Now that my mother-in-law was all alone, she wouldn't be able to see her grandchild's face, and she was going to live the rest of her life alone. As for us, we are going to live happily as a family of 3.
My name is John, and my wife's name is Jessica. Just as we were about to celebrate our second wedding anniversary, my wife made an unbelievable confession. To my disbelief, Jessica told me that when we were in college, she had an affair with a married man for about 2 months, and that was my own father. My brain couldn't believe what she was saying, to the point where I asked my wife if she was playing a prank on me. My wife and I grew up together. We were childhood friends because our houses were close to each other, and when we were younger, we used to play together a lot. As we got older, we became estranged, and after we graduated from high school, I ended up going to college out of state. During that time, we didn't have each other's email addresses or phone numbers, and so, we were like strangers. Apparently, Jessica had always admired my father, ever since she was little, and during those college years, she confessed her feelings to him, and they had an affair. However, after about 2 months, their relationship fell apart, and she told me that they broke up after that. A few years later, my father became ill and died. I'd come back home for my father's funeral service, and that was when I reunited with Jessica. We started to reminisce about the past and hit it off straight away. We exchanged phone numbers, and that was when we started to get back in touch with each other. Because I wanted to see Jessica, I started to come back to visit my hometown more frequently, and eventually, we became a couple. Even while I was away for college and not home, Jessica would often hang out with my mother as well as my sister and her husband, who lived at home with my mom. When Jessica and I started to officially date, my entire family, including my mother, was very happy for us. With all of that considered, it made this confession all the more unbelievable and shocking, and it made me wonder how my wife was able to maintain a relationship with my mother all those years after trying to destroy their marriage. The reason why my wife was making this confession to me now, after all these years, was because we were going to try to have children soon, and she said that she wanted to come forward before she became a mother herself. She said that in the beginning, she was planning on taking that secret to her grave, but that the more time passed, the more it was starting to weigh her down. This was all so shocking to me that after asking her if this was a prank, I was at a complete loss for words. But my wife kept talking.
I'm gonna be honest with your family and tell your mother and sister about this.
When she said that, I was even more shocked. But that was when I regained composure and tried to stop her. Don't do it.
Why?
Explanation.
I see. But no, I think I should tell them.
Don't do it. And this went on a loop. For my wife, Perhaps she may have felt refreshed by confessing her secret, but I couldn't even imagine how my mother would feel. Even if it was in the past, she was going to be told that her husband was cheating on her, and not only that, but that the mistress was her own son's wife. I tried to explain to Jessica over and over again that this was going to become the worst situation. And then, after hours of discussing it, even though she seemed discontent, Jessica eventually said that she wouldn't tell anybody about this. We decided to end the conversation there, and said we would speak more about it the next day. I started to walk out of the house when Jessica tried to stop me.
But why? Let's sleep together.
But I ignored her, and I slept in the car that night. When I was in the car by myself, I was at a complete loss. I felt things I've never felt before, and my mind was a mess. I couldn't help but wonder why my wife was able to be so normal about it. Even though it was already terrible to be having an affair with a married man, the fact that that man was my own father made me so disgusted that I thought I was going to throw up. In the end, I wasn't able to sleep that night, and the next day, I went to work feeling nauseous, like I might throw up at any given moment. When I got to work, I was so busy that I was able to escape from reality for the time being. I was just thinking about staying to work overtime when I got a call from my sister. It was rare for my sister to contact me, much less give me a phone call at a time like this, so I had a bad feeling about it. When I picked up the phone, that bad feeling became true. To my disbelief, despite spending so many hours trying to tell Jessica not to say anything to my family, my wife decided to make moves on her own, and that morning had gone to my family home and told my mother and my sister everything. My sister was absolutely furious on the other end of the phone, so I tried to calm her down by saying that I would be right there, and I hung up and ran straight to my family house. When I got there, my mother was standing there silent in shock while my wife, Jessica, was sobbing. And then I saw my sister, who had completely lost it and was screaming at Jessica, as well as my sister's husband, who was desperately trying to stop my sister from attacking her. Jessica should have known that this was going to happen, and so I couldn't understand why she would go out of her way to tell them, and I especially couldn't understand why she was crying. When I arrived, everybody calmed down for a moment, and we all sat down to have an emergency family meeting. That was when we discovered that my mother actually knew about my dad's affair all along. Because my sister and I didn't have a clue, we were shocked in a different way to find out that our mother actually knew about it. Our mother then continued to tell us that at the time, fortunately or unfortunately, both my sister and myself were away for college. Because she didn't want to make us worry, she said that they settled the case of the affair between the two of them. She said that she then chose to forgive our father, and she chose to stay with him in the end. At the time, she said that she knew that her husband was having an affair, but because she was exhausted from the mere thought of that, and because she honestly didn't want to talk about the affair any longer, she didn't go further to find out who his mistress was. It was a given that my father wasn't going to confess who his partner was either, and he quite literally took that secret to his grave. However, after all these years, that was when Jessica dropped the bomb on them. Over the last few years, my mother, sister, and my wife all had a great relationship, going out shopping together and going out to eat together. Jessica truly felt like a part of the family, so I can only imagine how my mom and sister felt to find this out. Because the other person involved in this affair, my father, was already dead, we wouldn't be able to confront him about it, nor would we be able to channel our anger at him. I'm sure my father also never expected that his own mistress was going to start dating his son, and that he would even get married. After that, to begin with the conclusion of this story, my wife and I got a divorce. Because Jessica was having an affair with my father back when we were in college, and at the time, Jessica and I were nothing to each other, that wasn't the main reason for the divorce. But for me, I couldn't forgive Jessica for selfishly going to tell my mom and my sister about the affair. On top of that, I couldn't believe that she could normally hang out with the wife and daughter of the man that she was having an affair with, and to top it all off, to be able to marry the son of that man, me! There was no way that I could understand the way that my wife's mind worked. When I told Jessica that I wanted to get a divorce, she threw a tantrum.
But why? Why do we need to get a divorce when I was finally able to lift this weight off my shoulders? I thought that we'd finally be able to be happy.
That's what she was screaming. But at the point of having an affair with my father, she had already destroyed our family's happiness. And then, she was making my mother relive that devastation. What part of that was happiness? Until all of this happened, I still had love towards my wife. But after everything that she did, any love remaining quickly disappeared. When my mom heard about Jessica's confession, even though she had forgiven her husband despite the pain, that wound was blown open, and my mother was hurt all over again. My sister said that she would never forgive Jessica, but of course that was a given. It would be more crazy to not be so angry after being betrayed that deeply. In the first place, I couldn't understand what Jessica's intention was by making that confession to us. How did she believe that she would be able to maintain a good relationship with my mother after confessing to her that she had an affair with her husband? My sister had also lost it on her. And that's why, when I arrived at the scene, Jessica was sobbing. On the other hand, it seems that Jessica couldn't understand why she was being yelled at when my father had already died, and she was trying to be honest about the affair. After all this time, I didn't know how I was able to marry someone who couldn't even understand something that obvious. But in the end, it had already been over 3 years ago that she had the affair with my dad, so there was no way to collect a settlement fee for the adultery. And that's why, in regards to the affair itself, there was nothing that we could do about it anymore. After I graduated from college, I was able to land a stable job at my current company, and my salary was also generous. Because of that, Jessica was able to live a comfortable life as a full-time housewife. I'm sure she was upset to be losing that as well, and so she stubbornly tried to deny the divorce. Jessica continued to insist on her stance that she didn't do anything wrong and refused to budge. There was nothing we could do anymore, and so I ended up calling her parents. Because we were childhood friends who grew up next to each other, of course I knew her parents well, and they knew our family. When they found out that their own daughter was having an affair with my father, they became super pale and came to our house, getting down on their knees to apologize. After they accepted the reality of the affair, I also honestly spoke to them that I didn't think I would be able to continue being married to Jessica after this. That's a given. Anybody would do the same. There must be something wrong with my daughter, who thinks that just because it's in the past, she can get away with anything. We will take responsibility and make sure that our daughter signs the divorce papers. We are so terribly sorry about what happened with your husband. They apologized over and over again to our family. When it comes to the affair, Jessica wasn't the only one who did wrong. Our father also messed up by accepting her advances. However, to continue to hang out with that family as though nothing had happened, and on top of that to get married to the son of that man, even Jessica's parents were struggling to understand their daughter's mind. And yet, despite everybody else being on the same page.
If I get divorced, then that's gonna make me a divorcee. I was just being honest. Why is an honest person being punished like this?
She was throwing another tantrum, but a few days later, Jessica's parents showed up at our house once again with the signed divorce papers from Jessica. And then, they said that as long as she was in this hometown, we were bound to run into each other, so they said that it would be terrible for all of us. And thus, Jessica's parents said that they were going to send her out of state to where her aunt and uncle were living. Also, even though the statute of limitations had passed already for the affair, they promised that they were going to make her take responsibility and send a settlement fee to our family every month. If I remember correctly, Jessica's aunt and uncle were extremely strict people who worked in factories in a rural area. She was thrown to them, and I heard she's being forced to work day and night at the factory that they own, without anywhere to run away to. Her parents said that if they let her stay at home, she probably wouldn't work, and just leech off of them for the rest of her life. And they thought that that would be best for everybody, and they forced her out. Jessica said that she made the confession because she wanted to have children. But I believe from the bottom of my heart that I'm glad this all happened before that.
My name is Michelle. I live with my husband Thomas and our daughter Nancy, who just started preschool recently. We're a happy family of 3 and I'm a full-time housewife. Every year it's a tradition for us to spend New Year's with Thomas's family and their family house. They live about 3 hours away on the bullet train. However, even though I would only see my mother-in-law a handful of times per year, every time I would see her she would always bully me and I hated going back to their house. Perhaps my husband was an only child. Maybe she felt like I'd stolen him from her. Every year the holidays were approaching. I would start to sigh more and more as I dreaded the New Year's Day. But paying no mind to me, my husband would just reserve the bullet train as if it was a given. That's how I felt as New Year's Day arrived. And just as expected, as soon as I saw my mother-in-law, she immediately started harassing me. Every single day that we were there, I was being bullied, and I was used left and right like her slave. All I could do was take my mother-in-law's punches, and I was exhausted. I could only eagerly await the day that we would be able to go back home. However, the day before we were supposed to go back, my stepmother demanded that we change our bullet train tickets to extend our stay. She did this the day after. Because my husband was home and he could laze around all day without doing anything, he was happy to do as his mother said, and he changed our reservation time and time again.
Hey, Mommy, are we still not going to be going back to our home yet?
Yeah, just wait a little bit longer, Nancy. We're going to be leaving the day after tomorrow.
You know, Nancy, you could just stay here and live with your grandma.
I want to go home.
Why would you say such a thing? That makes your granny so sad.
I'm sorry.
After spending multiple days here at her grandma's house, my daughter was starting to get bored of it, and she kept saying that she wanted to go home, and I was starting to lose my mind because I couldn't handle it anymore. As for my husband, he wouldn't even look in my direction and was only sleeping all day. My mother-in-law was very kind to her son, and she would absolutely do everything for him. So my husband must have loved being back home because he would never have to lift a finger. But to me, that was no excuse for him to ignore how me and my daughter felt and to keep trying to stay longer at his family's house. And I was starting to get irritated by my husband. And then, that was when my mother-in-law once again told us to extend the day that we'd go back home. Because Nancy needed to go back to preschool, I told her that we couldn't extend it any further, but my mother-in-law refused to give up, and she started to raise her voice at me and insisted that we change our ticket.
During the holidays, some of our neighbors have to go back home to their family homes, but when they get back, I want to show them my granddaughter.
But Nancy has preschool.
She can miss a few days, it's not a big deal.
We can't do that. I can't take my daughter out of preschool for a few days without any legitimate reason. When I refused her suggestion to make my daughter miss the first day of preschool, my mother-in-law became furious and she started screaming terrible words at me. I was about to reach my limit, and I went over to my husband, who was laying down and taking a nap on the floor in the living room, to ask for help. You heard the conversation just now, didn't you? Will you please go talk to your mom?
Shut up! You're so loud. I'm sleepy, so don't talk to me right now.
When my husband took such an annoyed attitude with me, at that moment I finally felt something snap inside me. Before I had the grasp of what was going on, I had raised my voice with my mother-in-law and was saying everything that I had been holding back until now. If I have to do everything as you wish to be your daughter-in-law, then I can't be your daughter-in-law anymore. So what are you gonna do, Thomas? If you want to break up with me, a failure as your wife, and live with your mom, then you can lay right there and sleep. But if you want to live with me, then you better get up because we're leaving now. As I said that, I slapped him on the head and my husband panicked and jumped up to get ready to leave. Normally, I'm very level-headed and I don't get angry, so I must have shocked him. After being yelled at by me, my mother-in-law was angry and she stormed out of the house. During that time, I rushed to get ready to leave and headed straight towards the train station, hopped on the bullet train, and finally made it home. I was finally freed from my mother-in-law and able to come back to my own house. But I still couldn't forgive my husband for his attitude. And so, as soon as we got back home, I decided to present my husband with a certain question. Hey, why didn't you back me up?
Huh? What are you talking about?
Don't play dumb. Surely you noticed that your mother had been harassing me all this time. And on top of that, I was being treated like a slave at her house. But why did you turn the other way and pretend not to see?
Don't be so dramatic. I'm sure it wasn't that bad. You're exaggerating.
When I heard those words, my blood was boiling, and I went back to my life with an unsettling feeling. A few days later, my daughter went back to preschool, and I was finally able to relax at home by myself when I received a phone call from my own mom. She suggested that because I wasn't able to go back home to visit them during the New Year's holiday, that our family could go and visit them that weekend. Of course, I said okay, but my mom could tell something was going on with me by my voice, and so she asked if something happened. And so I told my mom everything that had happened when I was at Thomas's family's house over the holidays. My mother was furious, and she told me that she would get my father's help and suggested that over the next break, she would give my husband the same experience that I had. And so my mother and I came up with a plan, and before I knew it, the weekend had rolled around. As soon as we arrived to their house, my parents immediately pulled the plan into action.
Oh my, welcome! You can relax and you don't need to do anything, Michelle.
Thanks, Mom, I will.
Well then, now that you're here, why don't we ask Thomas to go wipe down all the windows from the house?
What? Wipe the windows? And when you're done wiping down the windows, cleaning the bathroom will be next. Alright, Nancy. Why don't you come over here and play with your grandpa and grandma?
Yay! What should we play?
They made my husband do all sorts of chores and cleaning around the house while my parents started playing with their granddaughter. Don't forget about the windows on the second floor. Oh dear, look, Mr. Spot, please make sure you're cleaning properly. When my parents kept harassing Thomas about his cleaning, he looked over with me with begging eyes for help. However, just as he had done to me, I laid sideways on the couch and I completely ignored him. In the beginning, he was reluctantly doing what he was told, but little by little, my husband started to take the attitude with my parents. And then, perhaps he was no longer able to take it anymore because he started to take his anger out on me.
Hey, when I'm having to do all this work and go through all of this, stop ignoring me!
I slowly got up from the sofa and I let a disappointed sigh. So, now do you understand how I feel? My husband had a shocked look on his face and he turned towards my parents. Sorry, Thomas. Perhaps we were a little too mean.
Well, I hope you don't make Michelle feel the same way ever again.
My husband stood there awkwardly as he apologized to both me and his parents about what he had done, and then he promised that we wouldn't go back to his family home for the holidays anymore. From that day, my husband had started proactively helping me around the house and prioritizing the other chores, and he became very thoughtful of me as well. As a result, our relationship was better than ever. After that, every year when it came to New Year's, my mother-in-law would contact us to make a fuss about demanding to see her granddaughter. Every single time that she did that, I would simply reply that we are no longer going to the house of my mother-in-law who constantly harasses me, and said no. My mother-in-law was furious about that, and even so, I hung up on her and ignored all her calls. She reluctantly sent me a message with an apology. However, because I had suffered so much every single day from the holidays, I don't think I would be able to forgive her for a while. For the time being, we decided to spend the New Year's amongst ourselves as a family. Until that year, because my parents lived closer than Thomas's parents, we had always prioritized going to his families for the holidays. But we started to see my parents over the holidays as well, and my parents were so thrilled about it. Perhaps my mother-in-law was so sad that she wasn't able to see her son and granddaughter anymore, and she would sometimes call us crying over the phone. But after understanding what I went through, my husband would coldly reply, "Not until you understand," and then hung up. A few years later, even though my mother-in-law was living off of Social Security and she didn't have much money to spare, she saved up enough to buy a bullet train to come visit us. To be honest, I didn't want to see her, but I knew how much she saved to come all this way, so the three of us were going to have dinner with Thomas's mother for the first time in years. As soon as we were reunited, my mother-in-law broke down into tears. I truly am sorry for what I did to you back then. I regret it.
Actually, after that, I was also scolded by Michelle's parents. And when I put myself in Michelle's shoes and think about how she must have felt, I can completely understand why she didn't want to go to your place anymore.
You know, it's already been 3 years and you hadn't been home to see me. Look how sorry I am. So come on, forgive me already. Even though she was apologizing when I saw my mother-in-law stand up and take such strong attitude, I realized that nothing had changed since then. Surely you're going to come to New Year's this year, right? I can't stand to spend a New Year's alone anymore. After seeing her for the first time in years, I was reassured in my decision that I didn't want to spend New Year's holiday with her anymore, so I told her that she was more than welcome to come visit us whenever she wanted, but I couldn't consider going to her house anytime soon. At that moment, my mother-in-law showed her angry face, but then when my husband opened his mouth,
Mom, that's enough already. If you don't change that personality of yours, I'm not going to be able to come back home to your place with Michelle anymore.
What? When my husband said that, his mother fell silent. Even though I was happy that Thomas was angry that his mother hadn't changed her personality, I was even more happy that he took my side when he was defending me. If Thomas is going to protect me like this, then I don't think I'll be angry forever, and maybe not even a year. But every now and then, we could go back to visit his mother.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.